Imagine you were a crow, just living your life, stealing chips from children, judging people from rooftops, planning something you will never explain to anyone. And then one day, a giant, weird, two-legged creature walks up to you, reaches down, and removes a piece of plastic that was choking your foot for 3 weeks. What do you do with that information? Do you fly away and forget it ever happened? Or do you go home and tell every crow you know? Because here is the thing, crows actually do that second one. They remember your face, they tell their friends about you, and their friends tell their friends. A crow you have never met already knows whether you are a threat or a friend. But that is just the beginning. Because a dolphin in Hawaii once swam up to a stranger and asked for help, and a 50-ton whale held perfectly still for an hour while tiny humans cut it free, then came back and looked each one in the eye. So the question is, do wild animals actually know when you are helping them? Or are we just making this up because it makes us feel good? The answer made researchers uncomfortable, and it will change how you look at every animal you have ever ignored. Let's start with the animal that is probably watching you right now. And I am not joking. Crows run a facial recognition system that they built entirely by themselves, from experience, for free. Researchers at the University of Washington ran an experiment that sounds made up, but is completely real. They wore specific masks while trapping crows on campus. Then they walked around wearing those masks at different times, without trapping anyone. Just walking. The crows did not just remember the mask, they attacked it. But here is the part that should genuinely concern you. Crows that were not even present during the original trapping also attacked the mask. They had been told about it by other crows. Crows gossip. They literally gossip about you. They build a profile of every human they interact with, and they share it. Think about that for a second. There is a bird out there right now with a brain the size of a walnut. That has a better social intelligence network than most companies. But here is the flip side that nobody talks about. The same system works for kindness. People who regularly feed crows report finding gifts, shiny buttons, pieces of glass, small objects left precisely where the food was placed. The crow is not just taking, it is reciprocating. It has built a mental model that includes you, and in that model you have a relationship that involves mutual exchange. Does that sound like a machine responding to stimuli, or does that sound like something else entirely? Now, let us talk about the case that made marine biologists rethink everything they assumed about wild animal cognition. In 2013, off the coast of Hawaii, a wild bottlenose dolphin approached a group of divers during a night dive. The dolphin had a fishing hook embedded in its fin, with a long line wrapped tightly around it. Now here is what you need to understand about this moment. This was a wild dolphin, not trained, not fed by humans, not familiar with any of these divers. A wild animal in open ocean approaching a group of strangers at night. And it did not just approach, it went to one specific diver and held still, while that diver worked on removing the hook. But here is the detail that stopped the research community. When the line was tangled in a way that made it hard to reach, the dolphin repositioned itself. It rotated its body to give the diver better access. Think about what that requires. The dolphin had to assess its own problem, determine that it could not solve it alone, identify a creature from a completely different species as a potential source of help, approach without aggression, and then actively cooperate during the process. A process it had never experienced before. That is not instinct. That is not a reflex. That is problem solving across the species barrier. And it worked. The diver removed the hook. The dolphin swam away. But not before staying near the group for several more minutes. Was it saying thank you? Was it even capable of forming that thought? Or was it simply recalibrating its nervous system after a stressful experience? Here is what we know for certain. Whatever the dolphin was doing, it chose to approach, it chose to stay, and it chose cooperation over panic. In an ocean full of things that want to eat it, it decided that this particular strange creature was worth trusting. If the dolphin story stretched what you thought was possible, this one is going to break it. In 2011, off the coast of San Francisco, a humpback whale was found tangled in crab trap lines. The lines were cutting into its body, wrapped across its mouth and fins. It had been struggling for hours. A team of divers was sent to help. Now think about the scale of this for a moment. A humpback whale is 50 feet long. It weighs roughly 50 tons. The divers were the size of its eye. One accidental movement from this animal, one panicked thrash, and every diver in the water dies. That is not dramatic exaggeration. That is physics. The divers spent over an hour swimming around this creature, cutting through thick lines with specialized knives while trying not to injure it further, and the whale held still for over an hour. A 50-ton wild animal that had every reason to panic, that was in pain, that was exhausted, that had never encountered a human being in neoprene before, held perfectly still while strangers worked on its body. But here is the part that nobody can explain away. When the last line was cut, the whale did not just swim into the deep. It circled back. It approached each diver individually. One diver described being nudged gently but firmly, contact that felt intentional rather than accidental. Another said the whale positioned itself so that its eye was level with his face, and just stayed there, looking. Eye contact with an animal whose eye is the size of a grapefruit, staring at a creature 1,000 times smaller than itself that had just spent an hour saving its life. Was the whale expressing gratitude? Marine biologists have argued about this for over a decade. Some say it was simply post-stress behavior. The whale was disoriented and recalibrating. Fair enough, but here is what that explanation does not account for. The whale distinguished between divers. It approached each one specifically. It did not behave randomly toward the water around it. It behaved differently toward the individuals who had been cutting the lines. That is not random. That is recognition. Now let me be honest with you about something, because this is where most videos on this topic stop, and I think that is a mistake. There is a real scientific argument against everything I just told you. And it deserves respect. When a wild animal is trapped or injured, its body floods with stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and in that state something called tonic immobility can happen. The animal freezes completely. It becomes limp and still, and from the outside, it can look exactly like cooperation, like calm, like trust. When it is actually shut down, the animal equivalent of the blue screen of death. This is genuinely important because it means some of those beautiful rescue videos you see online, where someone pulls a fishing line off a seal and the seal just sits there looking grateful. That seal might not be grateful. It might be a neurological shutdown, too overwhelmed to move. Fair point. But here is where it gets complicated. Wildlife rehabilitators who spend years working with injured animals say there is a clear difference between an animal in tonic immobility and an animal that has actually settled. The breathing changes, the muscle tone changes, the eyes are different, and in some cases the animal actually leans into contact rather than simply enduring it. One raptor rehabilitator described birds she had cared for across weeks that by the time they were ready for release would turn their head toward the sound of her footsteps specifically, not toward strangers, not toward other workers, toward her, not because she bribed them with food, but because she consistently represented one thing: the absence of threat, Whether you call that trust or learned association, it is real, it is measurable, and it is not the same thing as a frozen animal pretending to be dead. So here is the question that ties everything together. Why would a wild animal have any capacity to recognize helping behavior from a human? Evolutionarily, it makes no sense. For most of our shared history, a human approaching a wild animal meant one thing: danger. So where does this openness come from? The answer is actually elegant. Animals that live in complex social groups, dolphins, elephants, crows, primates, need to read intentions constantly. They need to know if the group member walking toward them is coming to groom them or attack them. They need to evaluate alliance and threat in real time. That cognitive machinery, the tool that reads body language and maps it to intention, is flexible by design. It was built to read other dolphins, other crows, other elephants, but it works on anything, including a weird bipedal creature in a wetsuit, because the signals are the same: slow approach, no aggression in the posture, calm movements. Those signals read the same way, regardless of what species they come from. A dolphin reading a diver's body language is not doing something miraculous. It is doing something very ordinary, reading social cues and applying them to an unusual subject, which leads to an idea that is both simple and profound. Wild animals might understand human kindness, not because they know what a human is, but because they know what kindness looks like. In anyone. In anything. The signal is the signal regardless of the body it comes from. So here is what this means for you. Every encounter you have with a wild animal contributes to that animal's data set on what humans are. And those data sets are not private. They spread through crow warning networks, through elephant herd memory, through the behavioral modeling of young animals watching adults. Creatures that were here long before us are paying far closer attention to us than we have ever paid to them. The crow on your street knows your schedule better than your neighbors do. The dog you walk past every morning has filed your walking pattern. The birds at your window have a working theory about you, and you have absolutely no idea. But they do. When you stop to help, when you move a turtle off a road, when you slow your car for an animal crossing, when you just for one moment see the creature in front of you as something that has a life and a perspective that matters, that is not wasted effort. That is data, entering a network you cannot see in species whose cognition we are only beginning to understand. And somewhere out there right now, a crow is watching you, running a facial recognition algorithm it built entirely by itself, and filing you in a mental folder. The question is, which folder? If this changed how you look at the animals around you, share it with someone who still thinks they are just animals, and I will see you in the next one.